Seth Holhouse. Obviously, Trump getting in with the power of Elon, the money behind them, the technology, the young kids running the Doge operation are making significant changes in our society here in America. And I'm seeing a lot of amazing, amazing things happening. It looks like the Department of Education is being stripped down bare. The entire world is now being exposed to the massive corruption that is U.S. aid. I hope they continue to expose the corruption of the healthcare, the Medicaid, Medicare entitlements, let alone the Pentagon, the military industrial complex. It's absolutely wonderful. However, however, I want to pull up a quote from one of the most important people in our history, which is Thomas Jefferson, who said, "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance." Now, there have been a lot of individuals that are trying still to raise red flags and saying, look, folks, don't get too excited. We have to still be watching what's happening. And what I'm seeing is that these people, folks like Whitney Webb or Catherine Austin Fitts, or my guest today, Derrick Broze, people are very quickly rushing to say they're black pilled. They're black pilled. And I can't help but be reminded of the fact that the labeling of information like this goes back to the CIA and their creation of the label of conspiracy theorists. How are we going to get people to not question the JFK assassination? Oh, we'll call them all conspiracy theorists. And obviously that expanded to if you're anybody that questions any particular narrative, whether it's 9/11, any kind of shootings that happen, the vaccine and big pharma industry, you're labeled as a conspiracy theorist. Now, look, I'm not what I would consider a black-pilled person. I'm actually a really happy person. And the thing is that I don't take any pills, right? I'm not a pill kind of guy. I just am what I am, and I take natural healthy things and nicotine as for Brian Artist, but I'm not a pill guy. And I think that it's really dangerous if we get placed into these buckets where we're not willing to look at certain types of information and at least give it a chance to analyze it and think about it before we put it into some sort of bucket like that's black pill information. I'm not going to look there. And look, as a journalist and as the host of Man in America, I believe it's my job to expose you to different opinions. Because if I was just feeding you one pipeline, if now that Trump's in office, if I just became a journalist that is only going to be, roo roo ha ha for Trump, and I'm only going to be telling you, hey, this is what the White House is doing, here's the official press release, I'm not doing my job. I have to continue to question everything. Now, again, I still have hope for this country. I have a lot of hope in what Trump is doing. I have a lot of hope in what Elon Musk is doing. However, as per Mr. Jefferson, and I'm making you proud, Mr. Jefferson, I am still being eternally vigilant. I'm questioning the fact that, Trump brings out on day 2 or 3 Larry Ellison and Project Stargate. The guy Ellison, who's steeped in heavily with his background in working very closely with the CIA, to the point that they're now talking about AI developed vaccines. It's like, oh wait. Oh, they're going to solve cancer. Oh, they're going to solve the cancer that the previous mRNA vaccines have been causing turbo cancer cases. Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. So it's our responsibility to question things and to remain vigilant. And so my guest today, Derrick, is someone that will commonly be thrown in the bucket of being black-pilled, right? Along with, say, Whitney Webb or Catherine Austin Fitts. These people that I think actually are raising very, very important points. But my own perspective is that I want to be able to listen to all the different viewpoints and then come to where I feel comfortable and make my own decisions. So I want to hear what they have to say because I want to be watching these things. If I see Trump, starting to push forward more initiatives and executive orders that, in my opinion, are closer to us being in some sort of biometric digital monitoring state, I'm going to oppose that. I'm not just going to take it and say, well, if Trump's doing it, we're okay with it. I need to know what's going on so that I know exactly what to put my support behind and exactly what I'm going to be resisting and becoming very loud about resisting. And I hope the same is for you. So I'm doing this interview. There is a certain risk of me now being considered black-pilled for even having this conversation. And look, if I'm now a black pillar, please let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading those comments. But I just feel like it's my duty to bring different perspectives to you because you have the ability to listen to different angles and make your own decisions. I'm not forcing you to believe anything. And that's the beauty of it is that you have your own independent will where you can take this information, analyze it, and see what's right. And if you want to look at this and say, you know what? I'm done with Seth. He's now an anti-Trumper. Well, I think you've misinterpreted things because I'm actually not. But if that's your perspective, hey, great. You can go find someone else that's going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. But if anything, I hope that you can watch this interview and walk away with this perspective of saying, huh, that's a good point. I'm going to make sure that I'm eternally vigilant about those things. One other issue is that for some reason, the video signal with Derek coming in was out of sync with his audio for some of the time. So I apologize in advance. There's no way for me to really correct that post because it's kind of sporadic instead of one kind of consistent thing. So I do apologize if there are some parts of the interview where Derek's audio isn't completely synced up with his video. However, the audio should be perfect, so you should be able to get the full effect of the interview. So please enjoy the show. With the stock market at record highs, are you confident your portfolio can weather the next big downturn? Market corrections are quick and unforgiving, wiping out hard earned gains in an instant. Smart investors know the key to financial security is diversification. That's why Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for Americans to hedge market volatility and protect their wealth with gold. Since 2010, central banks have steadily increased their gold reserves, and in 2024, gold prices soared over 25%. Gold is simple. You buy it, you own it, you control it. With over $2 billion in precious metals sales, Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands of investors diversify their portfolios with gold IRAs and physical gold. And now, when you open a qualified account, Noble Gold will gift you 2 5-ounce silver America the Beautiful coins as a thank you. So, folks, don't wait for the next downturn to catch you off guard. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 today and see how easy it is to incorporate gold into your investment strategies. So again, that's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. Mr. Derrick Broze, it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you are, I would say, a true independent thinker, which I have so much respect for. And you have been, well, actually, I first came across you. You did an interview with Ian Carroll, and it was kind of one of these discussions about, is Trump the lesser of two evils? Is it okay to have that approach even? Because obviously, I think most people didn't want to have Kamala coming in for 4 years and, who knows what else. But there have been a group of people, yourself, Whitney Webb, Catherine Austin Fitts, that have been, I think, in a lot of ways, sounding the alarm and saying, look, don't get swept up by the Doge and all the great things that are happening because we could also be, being taken advantage of, and they could be constructing something that is not good for our future. And I think that the reason why I wanted to have you on is that it's important for us to stay vigilant, right? It goes back to the founding of this country, the importance of eternal vigilance. And I really respect, again, people like yourself that are willing to go out there and raise these issues, even though you're saying, oh, you're black pilled or whatever. We still have to listen to this perspective and just keep an eye on things. And so, anyway, I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then we can get into that discussion.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think I've probably been called black pilled more than I have in the last 15 years, in the last 6 months, because of what you were just stating there. So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the introduction. I've been doing independent media for going on about 15, 16 years now. And I really kind of came from an activist background. I didn't go to journalism school or really have any plans of doing this whenever I was going to college or anything like that. It really came about from me getting into activism in 2009, 2010. And then after a couple of years of doing the usual activist things, protests, marches, passing out flyers, I lived in an activist house for a few years, and we would do everything from community garden builds, trying to teach people skills, to, as I said, information, trying to spread info and reach the local population in Houston, Texas, where I'm originally from. And after doing that for a couple of years, we did have some successes. We were actually the only city in the United States to kick the TSA off the buses. They tried to bring the TSA from the airport to the bus line, and we successfully organized and kicked them out in 2012. We started to make the local media make the news, and it wasn't long before I realized that they weren't doing a great job. And, for example, one time we made the news because a Houston Police Department officer pulled a shotgun on us, a group of about 50 unarmed people, and arrested me. And this became a viral story in the city. And the way the media reported it was that a local group of conspiracy theorists surrounded the police and did all sorts of, made us try to sound like we were dangerous or violent. And really quickly I realized, like, okay, I can't count on these people to tell our story or tell my story or really to ask the hard questions to the politicians. And so I just started picking up a camera and started going to the Federal Reserve, started going to press conferences, getting kicked out of press conferences, and doing what I just was kind of mimicking what I was seeing other activists at the time do on the internet, just confronting politicians. And then after a couple of years, really started to take it seriously, and I launched the Conscious Resistance website in 2013 as a home for my investigative journalism, my podcast interviews, and then eventually my books and documentaries. And really, I'm a guy who's interested in sort of conspiracies, if you will, government corruption, historical corruption, things that sort. Also interested in the spiritual world and the world beyond the five senses. Interested in some of the more esoteric side of things. And for me, the Conscious Resistance was kind of a place to bring those ideas together, to do real fact-based, hard-hitting investigative journalism, and just to explore any sort of weird topic that I might get a wild hair to look into. And yeah, so I've been doing that since 2013, and it's led me all kinds of different places, as I mentioned, writing books and doing documentaries and doing public speaking more recently. And yeah, but it all kind of comes back to that root of activism. And I will also mention that the reason I call the website and the book series and the movement, if you will, the Conscious Resistance, is because my work is definitely an exploration of the intersection of liberty, individual liberty, and as well as the search for liberty, I think, in the kind of internal spiritual realm. And the reason that that was important for me is because my my political awakening, conspiratorial awakening, if you will, came about in 2009, 2010. I read Ron Paul's book, Revolution Manifesto, read Jim Marr's book, Rule by Secrecy, watched Alex Jones's Endgame. This is 2009, 2010. And also was listening to some music that was kind of anti-government at the time. And like all of these things were sort of coalescing at once. And that caused me to really change and shift my worldviews. I was never really a young kid that was trusting of the government generally. I come from like a punk metal background. So it was sort of like, yeah, F the government, but not really any sort of deep philosophical understanding of it. But with time and with diving deeper into these topics, that was sort of part of my awakening. But prior to that, about 5 years before that, when I was 20 years old, I got addicted to crystal meth and I went to prison, got locked up, spent some time in a meth house, spent some time homeless on the streets, and got myself sober, but I was still kind of in that drug world and ended up getting arrested. And between 2005 and October 2008, I did 19 months in Texas state prisons. And it was really that experience that first kind of caused me to start waking up, if you will, in a more spiritual way, where I started to, open up to God and spirituality for the first time, and meditation and prayer, and had a really big influence from my grandmother, who was sending me books about these topics, and kind of really was a lifeline for me while I was in that space and starting to do some reflection on, like, where am I headed? What am I going to do with my life? This is definitely not what I want to do. And so, yeah, that was really my first awakening, I think. And then when I got out of prison in October 2008 as a felon, now I had this fun experience of being judged as a felon, can't get jobs certain places, can't get rent certain places, can't get houses certain places, things like that. I would spend a lot of time at the library applying for jobs. And it was in that library that one day I checked out a book that was about the history of the drug war. And that was the first book I ever voluntarily took notes on, just because I was so enthralled by the topic, especially because I had just come out from, being charged with drug charges as part of the drug war. And that was like the first seed of something in 2009 where I was like, okay, this is not the version of history that I heard when I was in high school or college about, why drugs are illegal or how that whole drug war started and all those sort of things. And from there, my interest was piqued. And as I said, I kind of went on to discover these other bits of information. But I share that part of my story because I think it is important and it's intrinsic to my message that I don't think that the struggle or the fight that we're in is only one of the physical realm. Obviously, there's a lot of importance there, exposing governmental and corporate corruption and the physical manifestations of power. And that is what my journalism focuses on. But I also recognize and try to encourage others to recognize that there is a deeper struggle as well, what I often call our internal tyrant, the fight against our own internal tyrant, our doubts, our fears, insecurities, and limiting beliefs, and things of that sort, which can hold us back. And yeah, the exploration of that is what I call the conscious resistance.
Are you looking to do something better for your health? Look no further than Kimchi One from Brightcore Nutrition. Kimchi One packs all the fermented nutrition of kimchi in convenient capsules, arming your gut with over 900 unique strains of probiotics supporting gut flora and digestion. I highly recommend this product because all health starts in the gut. So, putting the right fermented superfood in your gut improves every aspect of your health, your skin, your hair, your mental performance, even your beard. Kimchi has even shown to reduce your risk of obesity and promote smaller waistlines. Kimchi One is all natural, made in the USA, and non GMO. Today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers, 25% off with the code Man in America by going to mybrightcore.com/Man in America, or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. Give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi One is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488 with promo code Man in America. And what a story. I'm sure you condensed a lot of information into that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, especially on the point of just the spiritual battle, because to me, it's the only way that I can frame all of this. Like, so I've also done, I've got a shelf, whole, kind of library full of the Jim Mars and, the a lot of more esoteric things and the, Sprigmeyer and, just that search for, okay, what does the pyramid structure look like? Who's controlling it? And the more I dive into it, the more I realize that it's not just this centralized thing. There's all these different factions and they're playing against each other. And we're just pawns in this giant war. But the only way that I've been able to make sense of all of it is to realize that, yeah, at the tip of the pyramid is just evil. It's just pure evil, right? You may call it Satan, you may call it whatever you want, but it is a battle, I believe, of good versus evil, and the fate of the souls, every soul on this earth is I think is part of this bigger battle right now in terms of where we end up. And so it's as I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing this term black pill, right, being thrown around. And when I was reflecting on it, as was talking about, with my wife, that I find that there's people that they have a very, I think, very rational perspective. Whitney Webb, she seems to be the person that has the biggest black pill target on her back. That she'll come out and say something, and like even recently, she put a tweet out basically saying, "Hey, look, everyone that's saying, yeah, we're destroying the deep state." You haven't realized it's just changing forms, and you look in the comment section, and everyone's like, "Oh, don't be a downer. You're so black pilled," and I think that it's important that we to listen to people like her. Even if someone doesn't want to agree with it, at least listen to it, because whenever we get into a place where we create a label and we say this kind of information is this label, therefore I'm not going to look at it. It's no different than the CIA creating the conspiracy theorist term. And that way, anything they don't want us to look at, they say, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory," and it keeps the public from looking there. And so, anyway, I want to dive into that more with you. But I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to to frame the conversation, because I would assume most of this audience and anybody hearing this is going to be familiar with or been a victim of being labeled a conspiracy theorist for questioning the status quo. And we understand how that is. I mean, we not only do we have the CIA documents post JFK talking about using that term conspiracy theorist as a way to diminish people's standing in in civil society, if you will. And that same thing is as you perfectly outlined, is being used against people like Whitney, myself, Catherine. I'd also mentioned Ryan Christian, and most of the people we're working with in the Independent Media Alliance, I think are taking flack in their sort of respective corners of the internet because of asking questions. And I don't think that, like, I mean, if we're going to even have this term black pilled, I guess I would redefine it, or try to more clearly define it from what people are saying, which basically what people who are throwing that at myself and Whitney are saying is, I don't like what you're saying. You're negative. So you must be wrong, right? That's pretty much it. They're not actually debating the facts, or even responding to the information we're presenting. And I think it's because largely because they can't deny that we're pointing out the influence of Peter Thiel and these other people that are very obvious to anybody who looks, and we're not making things up. We're not, using some sort of secret anonymous sources. We're using publicly available data to show these facts, and that makes some people uncomfortable who I think would like to believe only the narrative. As you said earlier, surely there are some good things that people will celebrate, including myself, who is very not much a Trump supporter in any way and not optimistic about Trump. But sure, did I celebrate the night Ross Ulbricht was freed? Of course. I was there in the courtroom when Ross was sentenced to 2 life sentences. I've been a friend of his mother's for over a decade now, watching and being a part of the fight to get him freed. So, thank you, Donald Trump, for freeing Ross Ulbricht. I don't think he did it because it was something he really particularly cared about. I think there's certain things, what I've been kind of promoting and sharing on my pages and channels, like especially right after the election, is that I believe there is, and I think this is already playing out, that there are going to be some very quick, easy wins for Trump in these first few weeks. We're 3 weeks in now, and I think that bears out. But at the same time, despite those easy wins, which don't cost Trump much political capital, and he's not really taking a lot of heat for, the other things that myself and Whitney are pointing out, the sort of technocratic influence within his administration, which is very big and pretty obvious if you're paying attention, that side of things is continuing to march forward while everyone is, well, let's look at what Doge is doing, or JFK files are coming, or Ross Ulbricht got freed, or Trump ended the TikTok ban, which, by the way, I think was just some kind of psyop. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, but I have friends who are on, and they told me that it was down for a total of 14 hours. And then whenever it came back on, the CEO of TikTok had a, welcome back USA. Thanks, President Trump. And of course, he was sitting right there with the other big tech oligarchs at Trump's inauguration. So, I generally think that, sure, there's going to be some positives, and I will, be objective and acknowledge those when and where they happen. But I also am very skeptical, as I think most people should be. And generally speaking, if I have any kind of bias, especially as a journalist, it is an authority bias, like an anti-authority bias. Like, I think, and that, to me, that's what all journalism should be. I think all journalism should be adversarial to people in power. Again, doesn't mean we can't acknowledge if something positive happens, but I don't think we should just take official statements from the White House or from intelligence agencies and say, hey, look, they said this, we're going to repeat it, take those press releases and then report them as news. That's what the establishment media has done for generations. And it seems like some people right now in the sort of Trump universe would prefer if those in independent media like myself and Whitney and others would just stick with the party line and not ask too deep of questions. Or another kind of extension I've heard about this even just today, as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was confirmed at HHS, is just let them have their wins, just let them have their celebration or whatever. And I'm sure I guess there's an argument for that. Have your day, have your celebration, but at the same time, I guess from my point of view is, if people are celebrating things that are not what they appear to be, or if they're celebrating things that also include, like, there's a part of that puzzle. So just to zero in on the RFK thing, RFK nominated, now he is the head of the HHS. People are thinking, this is going to be good for the truth about vaccines, and it may well be. I have friends who are in the fluoride fight, which I've been reporting on for several years now, as one of the only journalists in the courtroom reporting on the fluoride lawsuit, that are very hopeful. And according to some sources I have close to RFK, like, that is going to be a focus of his, right? Those are things that I would celebrate. But also you have to look at the fact that the deputy secretary at HHS, Jim O'Neill, comes from the Teal Foundation, comes from the Teal Fellowship, and likely, as Whitney has reported recently, will be in that position to potentially stifle, like, if you take the pure view that RFK is, coming in with good intentions, good heart, all that stuff. Well, the case might end up being that Jim O'Neill is there to stifle anything that he might want to do that goes against the broader technocratic picture. I'm skeptical of RFK in general. At his confirmation hearings, he said that he trusts the childhood schedule. And people are telling me, again, you're black-pilled, Derrick. He's just saying what he needs to say to get into office. And that may well be. That's why I'm not very good at politics, because I just think that if you have the truth, and in this case, we know the truth, the vaccine schedule for children is atrocious and is part of the problem, is the problem. I wouldn't go there and say, hey, I'm okay with the childhood schedule. I trust vaccines. I just want, better science and stuff like that. And so maybe I'm just maybe this is where me being black pilled comes in, and I can't see the forest for the trees. This is what I've been told by some people, is like, no, you just can't see. He has to lie and kind of keep himself undercover so he can get in there, and then he's going to disrupt things. Obviously, we're about to find out, but I remain very skeptical about that. And I also think, just on that, to kind of make that last point a little more fine, like, I do think that when we have truth, and bringing it back to the spiritual side of things, when we have truth on our side, we need to stand strong in that truth, and if that means we quote unquote lose in their game, that to me is more important than winning by compromising ourselves and saying, okay, well, I won, I become part of the machine, and I'm going to sort of try to do some good piece, little crumbs here and there, do some good work, but in the process I've compromised myself or compromised my principles and values. And I think, I also have other problems with RFK as far as the Zionism and things like that, but um, I hope that some good happens. I'm not here saying these things or reporting on these things because I want everything to be bad all the time. Like, and at the same time, I mean, I did have a conversation yesterday with a friend, sort of asking myself aloud, like, if this was what people genuinely believe it is, the golden age of America, and we're about to have all this disclosure and truth being revealed, would I be capable of recognizing that? I'm self-aware enough to ask that of myself and say, okay, would I be capable? I don't currently trust what's happening right now, and I think for good reason, and I have data to back that up. It's not just, oh, something feels bad, my gut says something, which sometimes your gut can be right too, but I'm going off facts. But I do have the self-awareness to step back and say, if this was what people believe it is, would I be capable of seeing it? And I think I would. I just don't think it's what we are being told right now.
I also think that one of the big things working against us is just looking at, like Stockholm syndrome, or just the psychology behind psychological operations and where we've been at for the, say, the patriot or the truther community. There's this feeling like we've been under attack for 4 years. Our country's been under attack. It's been, bled dry. We've got the open borders, and there's this sense of finally the hero is here. Finally, like it's our turn. And look at Elon Musk. Wow, one of the billionaires is finally on our side. And I think that also can create a lot of blind spots, right? Because it's very easy to manipulate someone in that situation, right? Say you're in a prison camp for 4 years, and all of a sudden, the general shows up and he's like, "We're going to free you." And well, what if that general is also a dictator and he's just going to take you from one camp to another camp? It's that situation that we have to be so vigilant about, and that's why I think that these conversations have to happen. And for me, I feel very optimistic about a lot of things happening, but a lot of my optimism. Actually, there's one book I always keep on my desk now. You've probably read it, The Crowd, by Gustave Le Bon, right? And there's this, I read this, passage, so many times. There's this one thing in the very beginning, which I think my bookmark fell out. Anyway, basically what he says in here, in talking about what is the most important thing. Actually, here it is right here, and like what actually creates lasting change in society. He says the destinies of nations are elaborated at present in the heart of the masses, and no longer in the councils of princes. And it was through this research understanding that actually the thing that determined the fate of the country was truly the people. And that's why the propaganda, the social engineering, that Edward Bernays following a lot of his work has been so critical in making sure that the will of the people can always be co-opted. And so I do think that, again, that's why having these discussions is so important, because what gives me hope is that if enough people can see through and see the truth, but ultimately realize that our own freedom is on us, right? And that's what, like, so your book here, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. This is it. It's about personal responsibility, because I think that if we get stuck into a place where we are relying on some sort of politician or something at the federal level to give us our freedom, we've already given up our freedom. And I think that that's one thing that I'm trying to do within my own life. We've got a small homestead. We're out in the country surrounded by forest. I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment, and being sustainable, growing our own food, producing our food, knowing how to preserve it, knowing how to fix things if they break, all these kinds of things. To me, that's where true freedom lies. And so, as much as I think that maybe the fact that I've lived a life like this, and my wife and I have created a life where we have a lot of control, it allows me to be more, I think, objective about what's happening in DC, what's happening, because I'm not placing all of my hope on that. And so, anyway, I'll pass it back over to you and
Yeah.
see what you think.
I think that's a major important point that you point out there is that the more free actually in the how to opt out of the technocratic state, there is something in there that I call the freedom equation. And I'll just mention that everybody can download the book for free if they want to pick up the PDF first and decide if you want to buy it at theconsciousresistance.com/how to. There's also a free audio book there that you can listen to, and it's available in Spanish, French, and German. Um, in there, I talk about this freedom formula. And basically, what it comes down to is that you take your level of desired freedom. So, what is it that you're actually trying to get? And of course, to even get to that point, you have to have the self awareness to even know what does freedom mean to you, right? So, there's like kind of a foundational conversation there. What does freedom mean to you? What does liberty mean to you? Get to understand that, and then from there get to understand what does that mean in my life. Like you named a few things. Okay, having land, being able to take care of my food supply as much as possible, being able to repair things in my home, like being as independent, right? That'll look different for each person, but I encourage people to like get to know that. What does freedom look like to you? Be specific, write this down. If you're an artist, draw it, like really be able to visualize and see what it is that you're after. So you take what your vision of freedom looks like and you add that to what you're willing to do to get that. Obviously, like this is going to vary person to person as well. And somebody might say, I have this vision of having a homestead and homeschooling my children and clean water and organic food and all these sort of things. But right now I'm living in an apartment in the city with minimum income, and it feels very far away. But that's where that second part of the equation comes in. What are you willing to do to get it? Well, maybe you're willing to work double shifts at your crappy job you have right now. Maybe you're willing to spend the weekends volunteering at a community garden or urban farm so you can get some of that experience in the meantime before you get to the homestead, right? Like really being able to think about what it is that you are willing to put yourself, your body, your mind, your heart, your family, etc., through to get to that level of freedom that you desire. And you add these two things together, what your level of freedom is plus what you're willing to do to get it, and that equals your actual experience of freedom. What you actually are willing to put in is what you're going to get out. And I think it seems so obvious when we really break it down like that, but I don't think we've been thinking in those terms as simply and as clear in those terms. Maybe people kind of have this abstract idea of, yeah, I want freedom and I want to be free to be left alone, I think, which is what many of us want. Or I want freedom to, just pursue my happiness, whatever that looks like. But if you can recognize that it is in your hands, as you said, that this is still, it's all up to you. I mean, for the most part, the government isn't going to hand you your freedom. Like there are some big things that government can do through executive action, which I think is a whole nother conversation, because I remember not too long ago when conservatives and libertarians and more right-leaning folks recognized that giving presidents this power for executive orders and executive action could lead some pretty bad places. And now it seems like it's something we celebrate. Like, let's celebrate unilateral action by the president instead of going through Congress or, consulting the people, et cetera. As long as it's something we think is good for us, we celebrate executive action. I think that's another kind of hypocrisy. But recognizing that for the most part, your freedom, your liberty is going to come through your own hands, through your own heart, through your own mind, your creator, and what you put into that. This is why I very much have been against these ideas of trusting the plan, QAnon, or waiting for Trump, or any of these sort of things that really, at the heart of it, teach people to sit around and do nothing and just expect that politics is going to fix everything. So even if we take the most charitable view of Donald Trump and his second administration and all the Peter Thiel acolytes in there, which currently number, I think, 10 to 12, and really truly believe, okay, Trump is who he claims to be. He's out here to save the day, which just wants to make America great again. And he's got all these negative forces going against him. Even if that is your perspective, which I'm sure some people believe that, he won't be able to fix everything for you. So even at the best case scenario, the most charitable case to him, you are still going to have to take care of your own life. Like, sure, Trump could maybe do certain things that lighten the load at the grocery store or at the gas tank and things like that. And sure, celebrate those things. But at the end of the day, he is not going to lead you to liberty. If anything, he can maybe, or a president, just broadly speaking, can do some things that might make it easier. But overall, the power remains in your hands. And that's largely what How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State is about. I mean, I've been, as I've mentioned earlier, as an investigative journalist, focusing on digital technology, privacy, surveillance, pretty much for the bulk of my career. Like, I realized early on that this was something I wanted to focus on. And so when I started writing that book in 2019, it was first published in January 2020, and then we updated it in 2022, sort of with 6 new chapters, post-COVID edition. And when I was writing it in late 2019, though, it was at the time there was digital rights groups and lawyers warning about the rise of facial recognition, which has continued. And currently, the United States only has one state that even has any sort of protections against facial recognition. That's Illinois. And the book was sort of partially a warning of like, hey guys, this is what's coming. I was talking about things that are a little bit more commonplace now, like warning about AI, warning about social credit scores. We didn't have the terminology for vaccine passports yet, but digital IDs and these sorts of things. And really just outlining how these tools, when combined, as we see in China and India and increasingly around the world, that these can be tools for a techno tyranny, a digital tyranny. And then also looking at the history of the technocratic movement in the United States and in Canada, which was at its heyday in the 1930s and 1940s. And essentially, these technocrats, they wanted to get rid of the political class as well as the business class. They thought that democracy didn't work. They also thought like the capitalists aren't able to fix all our problems. So instead, what we should have is we should have the engineers running society. We should have the technological and scientific elite
And
managing things. And
wasn't
they talk.
wasn't there some famous guy's grandfather that was the head of the Technocratic Society in Canada?
Yeah, Elon Musk's grandfather, Joshua Haleman. Yeah, I talk about that in the book as well. And yeah, and so I mean, these people like them, they basically were there. This is also, you have to kind of put in the context of the time, Great Depression, and so people are looking for new solutions. And so they're saying, look, obviously the capitalists are failing us. Obviously, democracy is not working. The answer then is to eliminate those things. People are too dumb to know what's good for them. Let's have the engineers and the scientists managing society. And they said they would do this using the machines. I think in our time, we would call this artificial intelligence, but they imagined that the machines would help them micromanage all resources, and people would have energy certificates that would, determine the amount of energy that they're using and where they can, spend it and things of that sort. A lot of things that are really kind of currently popular again. But if you go to Wikipedia and look up technocracy, it'll tell you that this was a political movement that had its moment and then it faded into the dustbin of history. I basically propose in the book that it did not disappear. In fact, when you look at folks like Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is a long-term, really deep state agent, Secretary of State at one point, advisor, national security advisor, excuse me, Kissinger was the Secretary of State, but both of them were advocates for what they called the technotronic era. So it was technocracy in the 30s and the 40s. It kind of fades away. Then in 1970s, Zbigniew Brzezinski writes a book called America Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era. And he describes many of the same things. He describes a world police state. He says that individual liberty would probably have to disappear if we're going to have this utopian vision of society where everything is micromanaged and perfectly resources were perfectly allocated. So the book is sort of warning about the rise of these various technological tools combined with this technocratic ideology that I think does guide people like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and some other folks like in their class who are, part of the billionaire big tech class. And so it was sort of a warning about all those things coming, but also, as the title implies, it is a sort of how-to guide. And it's just full of different ideas for people to think about. And I will say that I think what's most important is that these are ideas that I have used and continue to use in my own life. I'm not speaking abstractly, I'm speaking from my own experience, as well as from sort of crowdsourced information from other people I've met over the years who are on a similar path. I haven't used a bank account since 2008 when I was like 20 years old and 22, something like that. And I don't talk to certain US government agencies and never have. And it can make things very difficult, especially when you add on top of that what I shared earlier, that I also have a felony on my record. Even though it's been 20 years, there are still people and places that judge you for that. So, last time I was in Houston, Texas, where I'm originally from, and I tried to get an apartment out there. It was very difficult whenever I have a felony on my record. Plus, they asked to see rental history, where I usually pay cash for everything. They asked to see bank statements, tax history, all these kinds of things, which in our society, I think we have been programmed to believe if you have those things, you're a good, upstanding citizen. You're a real person, right? But if you don't have government documents, or if you're not being extorted by certain agencies, or you're not using the big banks that have been robbing the people blind and helping Jeffrey Epstein launder money, then there must be something wrong with you, right? And so the book does share my personal experiences of that. And essentially what I'm advocating for is what I call exit and build. And that is to exit from the systems that are coming very quickly, which I believe what I call slavery systems, and to build and or support those who are building new parallel systems. I essentially believe that the answers we're looking for won't be found in politics. They won't be found through insurrection or violence, and they won't be found by being apathetic and just giving up. To me, that's really being black pilled. If you just like give up, like I haven't given up in any way. In fact, I have a lot of hope for humanity. I just don't see that hope in the political class. So instead, I advocate people to there's two kind of components to exit and build. One of them is physical location, which I think many people will probably understand, because for anybody who lived through COVID 1984 and was in an area that was extremely tyrannical, you might have thought, you know what, the state over is looking a lot nicer. They did better during COVID. There's more freedom over there, whether that's Florida, Texas, Idaho, et cetera. A lot of people made moves, and that might have been a city over, a town over, a state over, a country over. I did move to Mexico March 2020, and my family's from Texas, so I do go back and forth. But that was sort of part of my exit and build strategy. That, not to say that's the right move for everybody, but that was the right move for me. And then the other component of exit and build is to take this holistic view of these different systems I'm describing, and I tend to focus on 4 or 5 main ones, being food, technology, education, healthcare is a big one, and finances is the other big part of that. And looking at those systems, we know, just to take the money side of things, Federal Reserve, debt-based system, fractional reserve banking, et cetera, and now CBDCs, stablecoin surveillance, all these sort of things on the horizon. And despite Trump's executive order saying he was going to ban CBDCs, Whitney and Mark Godwin have been doing some great work, and I've been picking up some of those threads showing that the same end goals can be achieved by using stable coins, Tether, USDC, USDT, and others. And so the problems aren't gone. And if you can see that that is on the horizon, then it would be smart to start being forward thinking instead of just watching podcasts all day or just complaining on the internet, and actually trying to perhaps be prepared for what's coming and say, okay, maybe I don't want to be dependent on these systems with all of my wealth and money and energy in there, because sooner or later they're going to turn into a CBDC, or they might shut me down because I have the wrong opinion on the internet. I don't think these things are gone for good just because Trump has come into office. And so that's kind of like the approach, is like, take this holistic view and look at the most important areas of your life. Again, I would focus on food, finances to start with, and that itself is a big thing. During COVID, a lot of people realized, like, maybe I don't want to be dependent on the grocery store for everything that I eat, because they can require me to wear a mask or require me to show proof of shots or whatever crazy thing they come up with, right? And so if we see the way that these systems are headed and how the progression that they're on, assuming that it doesn't stop, which I don't necessarily believe that their vision is going to be reality per se, but I also don't think we should just assume it's not going to happen, or that there's not strides being made towards that area. So then the general principle is like, take this exit and build idea, exit from the systems that you believe are going to lead to less privacy and less liberty in the long term. And it's a process. Like, you don't necessarily, and also maybe you don't have the same end goal as me. There are people who are like, oh, I'm okay with using banks. That's fine, but maybe consider switching to a local credit union, so you're not supporting the big banks anymore and you have a little bit more control over your finances, right? In the book, I talk about these sort of half steps. Like, it's a process of going from totally plugged in. Let's say you're a person that's got credit card debt and student debt, and everything you're doing is being tracked and traced through your check, through the taxation and other systems, and you're totally dependent on the grocery store, and your kids are in the mainstream public education systems, indoctrination centers. And that's not where you want to be. You have these goals. Like I said, think about what does freedom mean to you? Okay, I would love for my kids to be homeschooled, or I would love to have 50% of my food being grown by my family, or at least coming from local farmers. Set those goals and then start taking these steps to get towards that direction. And that way, whatever happens with Trump, whether he is the hero that some people believe he is, or if he turns out to be wearing a mask, as I believe he is, you're going to be okay. Or at least you're going to be better off than if you did nothing and just sat around and trusted the plan and assumed that being, just being in the political game and sort of watching the show is going to solve all your problems. I think that's the major message that I want people to take home. And, whether or not you support Trump or are skeptical or whatever, like take care of yourself, because at the end of the day, that to me is what really matters. So, I'm not coming at this from a sort of trying to convince everybody to hate Trump or anything like that. It's more just like take care of yourself, because these plans and these goals have been around way before we've ever heard the name Donald Trump, and they've been around for generations. And the people who are working on them are not simply going to disappear, at least not overnight, right? And there's still much more battle ahead, both spiritually and physically. So I think it behooves all of us who have this sort of ability, like if you have eyes and ears to see what's going on right now and you choose not to act, I personally believe you are failing the coming generations. And in our indigenous communities, which I'm, my
Numbers don't lie. The impact that Balance of Nature makes every single day is astounding. You can see the numbers for yourself at their website, balanceofnature.com. So, listen to these stats concerning Balance of Nature's worldwide success. More than 1,000 success stories are reported each month, hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, millions of orders delivered each year, and billions, yes, billions of fruits and veggie supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living better. There's only one number missing. That's you. Do what I did and add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements, like so many others around the world. Here's another number that should get your attention: 35%. Use my discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping and their money back guarantee. You must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use the discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping.
my family is from, and I've been taught to consider the 7 generations and beyond. So not only my children and their children, but great grandchildren and people that I will never meet. What is the world they're going to be born into? And the world they're going to be born into is 100% dependent on what you and I and everybody listening choose to do or not to do. And so if we can see that there are some potentially bad things on the horizon, I think it is up to us and the sort of our duty almost to act accordingly. And that doesn't mean we need to live in fear or assume the worst or anything like that, but be proactive. The other aspect of this is that I think if you choose not to act, you are failing your ancestors. Every one of our ancestors, no matter your color of your skin or your background or place of origin or, your language, our ancestors had to go through blood, sweat, and tears to get us to be alive in this moment, in this beautiful time and place in humanity. And I believe if we also again fail to act, that we are failing them and all the work and energy that they had to put in to make sure that we could be here at this moment, which I think is a truly crucial moment in humanity's larger history. So that's sort of the sort of energy that I'm coming from is like, I'm thinking of the coming generations. I'm thinking of those who've come before me and trying to be as proactive as possible, trying to, raise alarm bells and whenever I see them, and more importantly, lead by example. I mean, everything that I'm advocating here for are things that I'm currently doing in my life. I'm not just preaching, and not actually practicing what I preach. As I said in the book, a lot of it comes directly from my own lived experience, including the honest challenges that I've faced, like the difficulties in trying to sort of advocate for this approach. But I do think whether people push as extreme as I am or just sort of take steps that make more sense to them, becoming less dependent on their systems overall is a positive effort and a positive goal. And if you make that effort, I don't think you're going to end up somewhere and be like, oh no, I'm more free now, I wish I hadn't put in the effort. I think you'll end up being grateful that you took the time and the energy to consider these ideas.
Exactly. I'll pull up this quote from Jefferson, right? The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And this is so important because it doesn't say the price of freedom is getting the right president in the office, or whatever it is. It's not through that. It's being eternally vigilant. And I pulled up another article as you were talking there, right? On like, was it day 2 or 3 with Trump, his big announcement with Stargate, and he brings out Larry Ellison, right? A guy who has talked very openly about building a modern surveillance state where, quote, citizens will be on their best behavior. If you look into the history of Oracle, it's very easy to see that Oracle was named after the first CIA project that Larry Ellison, got. You look at Facebook, which I think is heavily steeped in DARPA and military technology, and that Zuckerberg was a front man to get people, okay with the point of putting their entire lives online so they can be tracked and traced and controlled. And this is something that I've been really concerned about is just the control and also the influence, but also the sudden 180-degree shift in support for Trump from the entire, big tech leadership. It just is kind of strange to me because the more you dig into some, the more you realize that Silicon Valley is very much so heavily run by the intelligence agencies, and so everyone's cheering and saying, "Oh wow," everyone's they're exposing the CIA and USAID, and but well, it's like, well, but how many of those same tentacles are controlling big tech? And all these big tech CEOs that we've been sold this story that they're these unicorns, these geniuses that built these products in their garage. I think in a lot of ways, it's much more the fact that these are just fronts for the intelligence agencies, and they find the convenient, kind of figureheads to be the person in charge of these. It's like if you really think that Sam Altman is the guy that's making all the decisions and running OpenAI, or if you really think even Elon Musk, right, is much, as I have very positive feelings towards a lot of what he has done, the guy got rich off of contracts with the military industrial complex. And so I
100%.
so I'm not going to overlook that. I can still be happy and celebrate, but I agree with what you said though, that I'm still really being diligent and I'm not relaxing now. I think actually that being prepared and building a lifestyle of self-reliance is even more important now than ever, even if for the fact, let's just say the next 4 years are going to be pure heaven and just absolutely amazing. What happens after that? Right? What happens after the next person gets in? And then what happens after 2 or 3 or 4 more presidencies have passed? Where's America then? I mean, when 2020, like the beginning of 2020, right when COVID was hitting, I was living in a high rise in New York City. Like I was literally living in the opposite of what you'd say is self-reliant. I had no independence. And so that year, I left behind a successful business, and I made drastic changes with my wife, and we moved to the countryside of Ohio and started building a homestead. And I think that that's the key is that I think it's, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I think that the problem is right now everyone's so focused on hoping for the best that they've forgotten the other part of it, which is that we still have to prepare for the worst. What if this structure that's being built? What if Stargate, which already raises so many flags about building an AI vaccine data center? It's just like, oh my gosh, this is like the stuff from nightmares. But what if that also gets used as a control grid to bring in some sort of digital surveillance state? And everyone now they're talking about, oh, well, the best way to manage immigration and entitlements is through, much more robust, ID. And it's like I can see the foundation for the point of them saying, well, it's actually better for every citizen to have robust digital ID infrastructure because that way we're not going to be giving away this government waste to the people that don't deserve it. And I can see a lot of people being fooled into that. Where I think again, this is why I wanted to have you on, not because I've just become totally black pilled, and not because you're black pilled, but because this is a very rational discussion that we need to have. Because again, going back to old Jefferson, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and that's what I see as my duty as someone that's in my own way a journalist, and certainly yours is I'm just trying to be vigilant. I'm trying to be eternally vigilant because
Yeah.
not only is the audience that watches me, not only are they depending on me, but my children, my children's children's, the 7 generations after me are also relying on what I'm doing as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, I've always loved that Jefferson quote because I feel like it does encapsulate sort of, for better or worse. I mean, obviously we wish we could get to a place where, okay, we reached this utopia and now we can all rest on our laurels and just sit on our patios and drink lemonade and everything's fine. But unfortunately, I don't think that, at least now, and maybe, once we leave this physical plane, we will find that heaven we've been looking for. But it seems like, for the moment at least, humanity's course is to try to fend off evil that is constantly trying to take over, and that there are people who will try to use the machinery of government and other tools out there, media, etc., to create the world that they want. And it's not one that does respect individual liberty, privacy, self-ownership, bodily autonomy, etc. And I just wanted to pick up on the point you mentioned there about Larry Ellison. For those who don't know, I write weekly articles. I'm the lead investigator at The Last American Vagabond, and we did put out an investigation right when the Stargate project was announced, looking into not only the project itself, but Larry Ellison's history and Oracle's history. And as you correctly point out, Oracle has had deep ties to the CIA from the very beginning. And literally just this week, as we're recording this, Larry Ellison was speaking at the World Government Summit. Yes, there's a summit called the World Government Summit. And I quote from him specifically, he said, "We need healthcare data, diagnostic data, genomic data, digital health records of the entire population, and to move it into a single unified data platform in order for AI to better understand our country." So the same guy who's talking about mRNA, AI, cancer vaccines, promising you they're going to cure cancer is out there advocating for a single platform to put everybody's data into. And you're also correct that, and this is something I've been shouting from the rooftops for years, that unfortunately, the people, what I term the predator class, are extremely brilliant and have so much data on us that they understand our psychology better than we probably ever can. And so they often put us in these situations where we're, in a rock and a hard place, right? Where, for example, the immigration crisis, which is a real crisis, is allowed to fester and to balloon, and to the point of, you don't have to be a hard right conservative to be like, this doesn't make any sense. These policies seem insane. Why would anybody do this? And so somebody like a Trump or somebody else comes along and says, I'm going to fix this obviously insane problem. People cheer that on, they celebrate it, they vote for that. But at the same time, Trump has been saying for years that his solution was a biometric entry and exit system for the United States to solve the immigration crisis. Same thing you could say with the sort of voting malfunctions and voting errors, and people suspicious about trusting the elections, which I don't necessarily trust any election. But the solution that will be proposed will be digital IDs for, maybe they'll start with, okay, we're going to have all the immigrants use digital IDs. Inevitably, these things will be expanded to the whole of the population. Like you said, they're going to argue this is going to be the best for America in all these different ways. And I guess that is sort of the situation we find ourselves in. The people who want to push us in this predetermined destination, this predetermined goal, they create or allow situations to fester like this so that we clamor for the solution they've been wanting the entire time. And I do worry that by the end of this Trump administration, despite whatever good may come, that we're going to be a lot closer to this technocratic police state that than we have been under any administration. And in fact, it'll be the people in the MAGA movement, at least some of them. I do know that there are some consistent people who support Trump. I don't, claim all Trump supporters are just blind loyalists, but for certain, he does have those, just like all the other politicians. And there will be people who will cheer this on and who will, talk crap at me and probably you for calling it out and say you're black pilled, you're negative, and try to do some mental gymnastics to make it make sense. But I absolutely think we need to be very skeptical of this. And one other point I wanted to make, you mentioned something earlier that reminded me of this book I've been diving into from 1943. It's called The Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom. And the reason it came up to me is because I was listening to an interview recently with Mark Andreessen, and he is, one of these big technocrats who's funded PayPal, Facebook, et cetera. Just another one of these kind of guys in the background that's associated with Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and others. And in an interview recently, he was mentioning how the worldview that he is informed by or that he believes in essentially says that there will always be an elite, that there's going to be, this elite that the people rebel against and the masses push back and this and that. But the way to solve that is for there to be a counter elite. And essentially, Andreessen has framed himself and Elon Musk and these others as that counter elite. So I think at best, sure, they may have some plans that might benefit people. They're pushing back on transgender stuff and pushing back on some of the insanity that, again, a lot of just average Americans are like, this doesn't make sense. But at the same time, they still see themselves as just the next ruling class. It's not that they think we're going to liberate the people and the people are going to become, autonomous beings who recognize their self-ownership and, are able to live out their life to the fullest, et cetera. It's just that we're going to change from one elite to the next. And in his view, at least the way he explained this and the way the book describes it as well, is that this is just the path of history. It kind of offers a sort of different historical analysis than, say, Marxist views of class struggle. And this is basically saying, like, there's always going to be an elite. You can't get rid of them. It's just a fact of life. It's just about, will the elite bend to the people's will, and after a while, if they don't, a counter elite will appear to sort of push them out and essentially use populism to appeal to the people so that they can become the next elite. And so I don't even think these people are really hiding what they're really after. It's just that they see themselves as the next, the right people to be in charge, and they're going to guide us to some golden age.
And that's what we have to be looking out for. Derek, I know you've got a pretty hard cutoff today. You have something coming up after this, but before we sign off, I do want to bring up your website one more time, theconsciousresistance.com. The links that I pulled up today, I'll put into the description, specifically this one, especially the book that you have here, where you give away the book for free. I bought it online. I'm a big fan of paper copies because they'll survive an EMP. So, but you've got the access here as well. So, Derek, as we're closing, do you have any final thoughts for folks?
I appreciate you having me on, brother, and I'd love to come back on when I have more time. I'm sorry for the short time today, but I'll just mention one other thing, and then a closing thought for anybody who does want to check out my work. The Conscious Resistance is the best place, and you'll see the latest link on there as we're recording this is the most recent chapter of my 17-part documentary series, which is called The Pyramid of Power, and I've been working on this for the last 4 or 5 years now. We're almost to the end of it, and for anybody who is kind of new to some of this information or just wants a refresher, I encourage you to start at the beginning of that series. Each episode is intended to be 30 minutes or less. And I essentially tried to take the best books, the best documentaries, plus my own original research, make them, palatable and bingeable for the Netflix generation. Every episode ends with suggested solutions. Every episode ends with, if you want to learn more, watch this documentary, read this book. And the idea is that we start with the education system and it progressively gets deeper and deeper and more quote unquote conspiratorial. We're going to be releasing the final episode this spring, which will try to answer the question of who or what is at the top of this pyramid. So I encourage people to check that out. And overall, yeah, I mean, I think that we're at a really crucial time. I mean, I'm readily willing to admit that this is a wild time. We're in some unprecedented territory for sure. So it's going to be interesting one way or the other. Let's celebrate the wins where they're at, but let's not put our blinders on. Let's not be cult members. Let's be critical thinking, free human beings who have the strength of our ancestors and who have the future generations depending on us. Let's step up to the plate. Let's rise to the occasion. And just pursue your independence and whatever that looks like, and don't allow yourself to be sucked into any sort of echo chambers that tell you that it's not okay to question things. I think that's what we really need to look out for. So thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. And one final thing is that if people want to follow you on Elon Musk's data collection system called X, you are at D Bros Live Live Free. So there's that
Yeah.
as well. So funny enough, and you can use Grok AI to tell you what's really going on in the world and tell you who Derek really is, according to Elon's AI
I
system.
haven't even tried that out yet, so I'd be curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Derek, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I thank you for giving me your time. And yeah, we'll have to set up another time when we've got some more just opportunity to dig into some more deeper topics. I'm sure we could go on for many hours. I could pick your brain on things. But thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the information you're putting out there. And I appreciate the time you give me today.
Thank you.
Numbers don't lie. The impact that Balance of Nature makes every single day is astounding. You can see the numbers for yourself at their website, balanceofnature.com. So, listen to these stats concerning Balance of Nature's worldwide success. More than 1,000 success stories are reported each month, hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, millions of orders delivered each year, and billions, yes, billions of fruits and veggie supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living better. There's only one number missing. That's you. Do what I did and add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements, like so many others around the world. Here's another number that should get your attention: 35%. Use my discount code SETH to get 35% off, plus free shipping and their money back guarantee. You must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use the discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping.